Hello everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to uncover the unexpected day that shook CEO Alex left alone with baby Henry. He burns breakfast, panics through the first cries, and discovers a kind of responsibility he's never faced before. If you enjoy the story, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next videos. Morning light slipped through the curtains and laid soft stripes across Henry's crib. The apartment was quiet in that careful way it becomes when a baby is asleep. Henry lay under a thin blanket, cheeks pink, breathing steady as a metronome. Tuna stood at the mirror, tying her hair back. Her fingers were quick but faintly unsteady, the weight of the day already sitting on her shoulders. In the reflection, her eyes kept drifting to Alex. Alex stood near the sofa, holding a baby bottle. He wore a confident smile, but his shoulders were tight and his grip too careful, like he was handling something fragile. "I have to be out all day today," Tuna said, gentle but firm. "Please take care of Henry for me. Everything's prepared in the bag." Alex nodded. "Of course. Don't worry." He was a CEO, used to teams and clear outcomes, yet one 2-month-old baby made him feel strangely small. Tuna leaned over the crib and kissed Henry's forehead, then looked back at Alex. "Change his diaper every 3 hours, feed him on time, and don't let him cry too long." She hugged Alex tight, brief, and urgent, like she was passing him the last of her strength. Then she left. The door closed. Her heels faded down the hall until there was only silence and Henry's breathing. Alex stood still, listening. No emails, no meetings, just him and a tiny life sleeping a few feet away. He touched Henry's minuscule hand with one fingertip. Henry's fingers curled faintly, a reflex, and warmth hit Alex's chest. "I can do this," Alex whispered, though the words sounded thinner than he wanted. In the kitchen, fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Alex pulled the crib closer to the dining table so he could keep Henry in sight. He tried to make a simple breakfast, 1 egg, 1 piece of toast, something normal to anchor the morning. The pan warmed. Oil shimmered. Alex cracked the egg and watched it hiss, then glanced back at the crib again and again. The egg stuck. He scraped too hard. The yolk smeared. A thin curl of smoke rose with a sharp burnt smell. Henry stirred. A whimper rose into a cry. Alex shut off the burner and rushed to the crib, scooping Henry up with clumsy urgency. Henry wailed, face flushing red, fists clenched. Alex pressed him to his shoulder and rocked him, too fast at first, then slower, searching for the right rhythm. Behind him, the egg burned black. Smoke thickened. Alex set Henry down for a second, flung the window open, cooved, then lifted Henry again, heart hammering. "Please," he whispered, not sure if he meant Henry or himself. He paced the living room, shushing, humming, whispering soft promises. Slowly, the cries softened into uneven breaths. Henry's head settled against Alex's shoulder, warm and heavy. Relief washed through Alex, followed by a hard realization. The cries weren't noise. They were a plea he hadn't learned to answer yet. Holding the now calming baby, he felt the first thin thread of connection tug inside him, fragile but real. When Henry drifted back towards sleep, Alex sat down carefully, afraid to move too soon. The kitchen smelled like burnt failure, but it didn't matter the way it should have. What mattered was the weight of Henry against him, and the quiet after the storm. Later, sunlight climbed higher and stretched across the wooden floor. Henry woke again with restless whimpers that quickly became sharp cries. Alex set the bottle down and drew a deep breath. "Okay," he told himself, step by step. The diaper smell hit him the moment he opened the onesie. Alex paused, then pushed through it. Henry kicked hard, crying louder, legs thrashing. Alex wiped carefully, hands clumsy, terrified of hurting delicate skin. The diaper tabs went on crooked. He redid them once, then again, sweat forming at his hairline. Each wail tightened something in Alex's chest, like an invisible hand. He wanted a clean checklist, a finished result. But Henry wasn't a project. Alex lifted him and began pacing, humming a half-remembered lullaby from childhood. His voice cracked, the melody imperfect, but it gave him something steady. Slowly, Henry's cries softened. Warm baby breath brushed Alex's collar. The tiny body relaxed. Alex stopped walking and stared down at the child, drifting towards sleep in his arms. The pressure remained, but woven through it now was a fragile, unexpected joy, small, almost frightening in how honest it felt. He laid Henry back in the crib with surprising gentleness. The room fell into near sacred quiet, filled only by even breathing, and Alex's heartbeat slowing to match. Midday heat pressed into the apartment. The living room looked like a storm. Bottles, wet wipes, cloths scattered everywhere. Alex stared at the mess and decided to clean, not for appearances, but for control. Order felt like safety. He knelt in the bathroom with a brush and cleaner, scrubbing in tight circles. The chemical scent was sharp. Every scent stayed tuned to the next room. A small cry rose. Alex rushed out, picked Henry up, held him close, and the baby quieted almost instantly. Alex set him down and returned to scrubbing, harder now, channeling tension into each motion. Another cry, another sprint, back and forth until his arms shook with fatigue. When the bathroom finally gleamed, Alex collapsed against the wall, breathing heavily. Henry slept deeply, tiny fist gripping the blanket edge like a lifeline. A weary smile crossed Alex's face. Housework no longer felt beneath him. It felt like part of shielding this child. By late afternoon, light turned amber on the walls. Alex returned from the market with heavy bags, Henry asleep against his chest in a carrier. He lowered Henry into the crib and sank to the floor beside it, exhausted like he'd run a marathon. The apartment was still messy, but the chaos no longer terrified him. It looked lived in, survived. Henry stirred faintly in sleep, fingers grasping at nothing. Alex rested a fingertip against that tiny hand, and warmth spread through him. For the first time, he didn't dread the next cry. He almost anticipated it, not for stress, but for the chance to hold Henry again. He glanced at the wall clock and realized today belonged to something bigger than deadlines. Outside, evening crept closer. Alex stayed on the floor beside the crib, listening to Henry breathe and feeling a quiet truth settle in. Control had never been the point. Showing up was enough. He stood, stretched out the ache in his back, and moved through the room, picking up the smallest pieces of the day. Caps, wipes, a burp cloth. Each item felt ordinary, yet each one carried a lesson he hadn't expected to learn. Attention is love in its simplest form. He checked the bag Tuna had packed, rereading her notes like a manual, then like a letter. Feed at this time. Warm the bottle like this. Call if something feels wrong. Alex tested the water temperature on his wrist the way she'd shown him, then set the bottle by the warmer, ready for the next wake-up. He watched Henry's chest rise and fall, counting the seconds between breaths without realizing he was doing it. In boardrooms, he measured time by profit and loss. Here, time was measured by a tiny inhale, a tiny exhale, and the relief that followed. Outside the window, street sounds drifted by, distant and soft. Inside, Alex lowered his voice as if the apartment itself might startle. "We're okay," he whispered, not sure if he meant Henry, Tuna, or himself. He didn't feel like a hero. He felt tired, humbled, and grateful. For the first time, success looked like this. A room, a safe baby, and patience he could finally touch. Streetlights flickered on outside, laying a soft gold glow across the curtains. The apartment felt smaller at night, quieter too. like it was holding its breath with Henry. Alex was still on the floor beside the crib when he heard it. The faint jingle of keys, the lock turning, the door opening. Tuna stepped inside. Her shoulders were slightly slumped with the weight of being out all day. But the moment her eyes landed on the crib, her face changed. She saw Alex there, close to Henry, one hand resting near the baby like a silent guard, and something in her expression softened. She paused at the threshold, taking everything in. The room wasn't tidy. There were wipes on the table, a bottle cap on the floor. The faint smell of cleaner still lingered in the air, mixing with formula. But the place felt warm in a way it hadn't that morning. Warm not because of lights or blankets, but because someone had tried. Alex looked up and offered a tired smile. His voice came out hoarse, scraped raw by hours of shushing and humming. "You're back," he said quietly. Tuna walked over, set her bag down, and leaned into the crib. She kissed Henry's forehead the same way she had in the morning, but now it carried a different emotion relief. Henry didn't wake. He only shifted slightly, tiny fingers curling as if he recognized her even in sleep. Tuna turned to Alex. Her eyes shimmered, and she didn't hide it. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know today was really hard for you." Alex exhaled slowly. He wanted to joke, say it was easy, say he had everything under control, but the truth was written all over him. The sweat that had dried at his temples, the faint scratch on his wrist from a crooked diaper tab, the heaviness in his posture. So he only nodded. "I messed up the egg," he admitted softly, almost embarrassed. Tuna's lips twitched into a small smile, and the smile carried tenderness instead of teasing. "And Henry?" Alex glanced at the crib. "He cried." "A lot," he said, "but we figured it out. Eventually." That word, "we," hung in the air for a second. Neither of them commented on it, but both of them felt it. Tuna reached into her bag and pulled out a small box. It wasn't large or flashy, just something she could hide easily in her palm. She sat beside Alex on the floor and opened it. Inside was a simple wristwatch, elegant, clean, the kind of design that didn't shout. The face caught the lamplight and gleamed quietly. "I bought this for you," Tuna said. Her voice was gentle, but firm in a way that carried meaning. "Not to make up for anything, but so you'll remember that the time you gave Henry today is priceless." Alex stared at the watch for a moment, like he didn't know how to accept it. In boardrooms, gifts were strategy. In business, everything had a reason. But this wasn't that. This was gratitude, pure and unguarded. His fingers trembled as he took it. Not from fear now, but from the strange pressure of being seen not as a CEO, not as a man with money, but as someone who had simply tried. He looked at Tuna, then he looked at Henry. The baby's chest rose and fell in calm rhythm, unaware that his presence had rearranged two adult hearts in a single day. Alex swallowed. "You didn't have to. I wanted to," Tuna cut in softly. "Because you stayed, because you tried, because you didn't run from the crying." Alex lowered his gaze again and fastened the watch on his wrist. The strap clicked into place. The second hand began its steady journey, ticking forward, without rushing, without stopping like the day had. For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply listened to the soft tick and the softer sound of Henry's breathing. Outside, distant traffic moved like a low ocean. Inside, everything felt still. Tuna leaned her shoulder lightly against Alex's. It was a small contact, but it carried a lot. Exhaustion, relief, trust, the fragile hope that tomorrow wouldn't feel as heavy. Alex's voice came out low. "I didn't realize how long a day is," he said. Tuna gave a quiet laugh, not mocking, just understanding. With a baby, a day can feel like a whole lifetime. Alex nodded, eyes fixed on the crib. "When he cried, I felt useless," he admitted. "I kept thinking, I can solve anything at work. But with him, I didn't know what he needed." Tuna's expression softened further. "You learned," she said. "That's what matters." Alex looked at her. "And you do this every day." Tuna didn't answer immediately. She only looked down at her hands. They were clean now, but the wear was still there, the small signs of someone who carried too much without complaint. Alex's throat tightened. He reached out and covered her hand with his. Not grand, not dramatic, just present. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for leaving you with all of it." Tuna blinked, and a tear slipped free before she could catch it. She didn't wipe it away right away. She let it exist, like proof that she had been holding in too much for too long. "Just don't disappear again," she whispered. Alex nodded once, firmly. "I won't." Henry stirred faintly, a small sound in his sleep, and both of them froze for a second, instinctively listening. But the baby settled again, breathing evenly. The moment passed, leaving behind a calm that felt earned. Tuna stood and began gathering the scattered items, bottle caps, wipes, a cloth moving with quiet efficiency. Alex tried to stand too, but his body protested with fatigue. He laughed under his breath, surprised by his own exhaustion. "Sit," Tuna said, half commanding, half caring. "You did enough today," Alex obeyed, and for someone who always hated being told what to do, it felt strangely comforting. Tuna moved to the kitchen, peered at the pan, and let out a soft, amused sigh. "You really did burn it." Alex raised a hand in surrender. "It attacked me first." Tuna shook her head, smiling, and began cleaning up without complaint. The sound of water running filled the apartment, soothing and ordinary. Alex watched her for a moment, then looked back at Henry. Under the lamplight, the baby's face looked peaceful, untouched by the chaos he'd caused earlier. Alex realized something. Henry didn't need perfection. He needed presence. He needed hands that came when he cried. He needed hearts willing to learn. Tuna returned and sat beside Alex again. This time, they both leaned close to the crib, shoulder to shoulder, breathing in the same quiet. The long day panic, burnt eggs, crooked diapers, rushing back and forth began to dissolve. Not erased, but transformed into something meaningful, like a test that had turned into a bond. Alex glanced at the watch on his wrist. The second hand kept moving, steady and patient. He understood the gift now. It wasn't about time passing. It was about time given. Tuna whispered, almost to herself, "Tomorrow will be easier." Alex looked at her, then at Henry, and felt hope settle in, fresh, quiet, durable. "Tomorrow," he agreed, "we do it together." And in the soft lamplight, with Henry sleeping between them, that simple sentence felt like an unspoken promise etched into the night. Steady as the ticking on Alex's new watch. Tuna leaves early for a full day out and asks Alex to care for 2-month-old Henry, giving strict instructions on feeding and diaper changes. Alex, a confident CEO at work, feels unexpectedly overwhelmed at home. He tries to cook breakfast, but panics when Henry wakes and cries, burning the egg while he struggles to soothe the baby. Throughout the day, he fumbles through diaper changes, pacing and humming a childhood lullaby until Henry calms against his chest. Alex attempts to clean the house, repeatedly dropping chores to respond to every cry, slowly realizing that care is constant attention, not control. By late afternoon, he returns from the market exhausted but proud, no longer fearing Henry's cries. When Tuna comes home, she's moved by Alex's effort and gives him a wristwatch to honor the priceless time he gave Henry. They share quiet hope to raise Henry together.